why I'm single. Look at this perspective. Hey y'all, rom-coms are predictable as hell, but they get one thing right when it comes to romance. Ain't nothing like falling in love abroad. So in this video, I'm going to share little stories on how I've approached dating abroad. And also, really important to know, I'm not trying to sell you on no rom-com dreams here. Foolishness, tomfoolery has no geographic bounds. I'm also gonna share some of my more horrific dates while abroad. I think it shares a really important perspective, especially as a woman traveler, solo traveler, and Black traveler. So I'm gonna share it in the dating context, but also just share my experience more broadly as a traveler. It's also important to talk about safety on these dates because I always meet in public. I don't tell them my address. I'm like, I don't need to be walked home, peace. You want to be able to call an Uber or some sort of rideshare. Do your research on how to navigate situations safely. I wouldn't just meet up with anyone from this country just because I'm in this country. I think it's still important to have standards, and also it will just make your date better as well. So you definitely want to find some sort of commonality. You also want to make sure that they have some level of good energy based on the quality of the conversation. And even if the date doesn't go well, you can always just get a lot of good recommendations. It's the new to the city energy. I think that's just like such a great fit when it comes to dating. So this is honestly one of my go-to moves. Your date gives you a personal tour of their city. This I've done in so many countries, more than I can count. I think my favorite was when I was in Venice. I think they were an architect, or at least very knowledgeable about the architecture and history of Venice. So we kind of just walked around, got some Aperol spritzes, just explored different things. Mexico did that too. I think it's really cool to talk to someone local about the political environment. As a Black traveler, I always talk about the race relations because it's important to have that awareness, as well as gender awareness and how women are treated and all this stuff. There's nothing like talking to a local about that. I think a big advantage of dating while abroad, especially if you're in a country where you're not a native speaker, not only does your date know how to avoid the tourist traps, they really know the best parts of the city, but they also have those language and cultural skills. There's a lot of tourist traps too, so sometimes I'm abroad and I get some food and I'm like, that's it. Or sometimes if I'm looking online myself and I see like what's trending on TikTok, it's just like I'm in a restaurant full of expats or other travelers. If I pay this much for this plane, I got on this long ass flight, I want to have a true and more authentic experience, especially with the food. I'm actually gonna say that dating abroad is way better. I've talked to other digital nomads, mostly Black women, about this. We were all on the same page in terms of the quality of the dates, the vibes, the hotness. The hotness. And we didn't talk about the hotness. I'm just trying to upsell y'all. Ugh, I hate these trends and stats, but you know that there is, at least in the United States, when it comes to dating, there are some levels of racial hierarchies or tendencies when it comes to getting good matches. Maybe online dating is horrible for you in your home country, but maybe when you're in another place where people have a different relationship with race, those trends may result in better dating experiences for you. Because I don't want to give y'all a rom-com fantasy with this, let's shift into the less fabulous dates. I think this is based on my experience as a Black traveler. There are some places in the world where I find it a little bit more challenging to be a Black solo traveler. I love Vietnamese food. I was just ready to be in Vietnam, but I found it really challenging to be there alone. There's just such a difference between Western culture and Eastern culture, especially when it comes to dating, just in and of itself. And being in a place where not only were there no Western people, I didn't really even see that many non-Asian people, and I'm also Black, so it was just like so many layers. When I was going around, everyone was waving at me. I felt like a celebrity, but it also felt kind of fetishy. There's so many motorbikes and motorcycles, and the streets are just flooded, and I'm just on the back of a motorcycle. Everyone's like surrounding me, waving. It's really overwhelming. I did get my Tinder game on when I was in Vietnam. So I was on a date, and to connect with me, my date said, Can I even say this with a straight face? I love, my date said, I love the movies where the Black people overcome their challenges. And even because this went on and on to describe this movie, it was just so awkward. It's funny because I feel like, especially as a Black traveler or any type of background that's marginalized, I feel like you're kind of burdened with this added level of vigilance when it comes to entering spaces, especially spaces where you don't know the language or there's a cultural difference. And based on your history and being in your home country where you're dealing with hate in your backyard, you kind of expect that to follow you around. But the beautiful thing I've experienced and also observed is that sometimes you can feel a stronger sense of home in a different place. I was thinking about those like Black artists, expats, like James Baldwin, Josephine Baker. There's so many icons in our history who have found a refuge in going abroad where they have been really embraced, which is really sad to say, but really embraced more than in their home country.
When I left this country in 1948, I left this country for one reason only, one reason. I didn't care where I went. I might have gone to Hong Kong, I might have gone to Timbuktu, I ended up in Paris, on the streets of Paris, with $40 in my pocket on the theory that nothing worse could happen to me there than it already happened to me here. You talk about making it as a writer by yourself. You have to be able then to turn off all the antenna with which you live, because once you turn your back on this society, you may die. You may die. And it's very hard to sit at a typewriter and concentrate on that if you're afraid of the world around you. The years I lived in Paris did one thing for me. They released me from that particular social terror, which was not the paranoia of my own mind, but a real social danger visible in the face of every cop, every boss, everybody.
Honestly, the most hate I've dealt with from my race has been within my home country. Okay, this is like a little bit of a detour, but I think it's also important to add. Again, this is just my experience, but I think when it comes to dating while abroad, I think it's better to date locals than other travelers. This sounds hypocritical, doesn't it? I have a very hypocritical and disrespectful opinion about digital nomads, including myself. And I think it's because of my experience. I'm like, let me call us out. A lot of the digital nomads I've encountered are in some sort of energy around self-exploration. So it's really hard to immediately connect with someone, especially romantically, if they're on a journey that is very self-determined, self-defined, and very intentional. And this ain't always true, but I've met many travelers. They were definitely coping with a breakup, that eat, pray, love, let's go on a trip. Actually, that's another, rom-coms got that right too. People be going on vacations after being dumped. I met some weirdos on my most recent trip. One of them was, I forgot how they phrased it, but apparently they made enough just showing their feet on OnlyFans to live off of in Colombia. And the other person, I think they were like one of those tech remote worker types throwing their high incomes around, and where there was a lot of US purchasing power. I'm holding off a rant there. Right out the gate with the date, they just had scammer energy. It was weird. They mentioned having an Airbnb property. Oh, the construction's not done and I have my first guest coming in like next month, so I need to go back home. And I said, wait, how do you already have guests? What pictures did you show them? And they said, oh yeah, you know, like Photoshop, I know what it's gonna look like. I was actually talking to a group of digital nomads I was living with in Colombia. One mentioned the hard thing about being a digital nomad is that no one loves you. Like, you don't have your community to check in on you or take care of you when you're sick. That broke my heart. And the other person I was talking to at the time kind of like pushed back on that, about like how you can always connect with people who at any time. And sometimes like when it comes to your original community, as you grow and evolve and change, you kind of realize that you're kind of separating because you're dealing with different experiences. And of course, when you're a nomad, you can really relate to each other on your exploration journey, constantly having to deal with that isolation. So sometimes it's easier to connect with people while you travel, especially depending on your why. Your whys are more aligned. Y'all ended up in the same place. Clearly you have similar tastes. Dating while abroad just kind of gives you a nice blank slate. With my therapist back in the day, I used to talk about vacation Aussie and real life Aussie as two completely separate entities. He always asked me and tried to encourage me to figure out, why am I not being more of my vacation self when at home, and why are these identities so separate for me? And there's something about the freedom of travel that just allows you to be more of yourself. There's no one around you who's known the old you or new you, holding you to old expectations that can feel a little bit limiting. And you're kind of this, I feel like you're this dealing with a lot of excitement and energy about where you are. I feel like the places you pick matter, and I feel like they reflect the type of exploration you want to do. I really encourage anyone, even if you've never been on a dating app before, if you're single, if you're solo, I feel like it's just a great way to explore yourself. And of course, especially as digital nomads, we have to hold on to this hope, because let's be real, otherwise we'd be hella lonely. It would feel like our love lives, our personal lives, everything was just indefinitely on hold until we were back on a traditional path. All right, yeah, I think that's over now. Peace.